He stepped off the aircraft with the weight of 1,000 decisions pressed into his shoulders. His eyes scanned the unfamiliar surroundings, not with the gaze of a statesman, but as a man searching, urgently, for something he couldn't name. It wasn't a state visit. No press, no entourage of flashing cameras, just the quiet hum of jet engines and the occasional murmuring of personnel unsure of what they were witnessing. The former leader of the free world was not expected. Yet here he was, standing at the edge of a private runway in West Africa, unguarded by diplomacy, untouched by political theater. A man known for commanding attention now seemed desperate to avoid it. He wasn't here to give a speech or negotiate a deal. He was here for something else, something that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the soul. In a few moments, something would happen that no advisor, no strategist, no government staffer could have scripted. A moment that would shake every assumption about power, pride, and the invisible hand that moves behind the curtain of nations. Because in this moment, the man once called the most powerful on earth would kneel. He would bow, not before a throne of politics or wealth, but before a man of God. And that man was Apostle Joshua Selman. This is the story no one told you. The encounter hidden from the headlines. The meeting that blurred the lines between sovereignty and surrender. What could make a global leader fall to his knees in front of a preacher? Why did Donald Trump request to meet a man whose pulpit was not made of gold, but of raw truth in the presence of the Holy Spirit? And what happened in that brief, breathless exchange on African soil that would leave both men forever changed? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not just a story. It is a moment frozen in time, a window into what happens when destiny interrupts power, and when God chooses a runway instead of a throne room. Before we continue, if stories like this move you, challenge you, or even leave you with more questions than answers, then you're in the right place. Click like to help more people find this story. And subscribe, because what you're about to experience, this is only the beginning. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened. The day President Donald J. Trump asked Apostle Joshua Selman to pray for him. To understand what really happened that day, you have to go back, not just to an airport or a prayer, but to two very different worlds colliding at a point no one could have predicted. On one side, you have a man shaped by power, bold, controversial, relentless. A man who stood behind the podium of the White House, his words sending ripples across continents. He divided nations, he inspired movements, he redefined what it meant to lead, and in doing so, became both admired and misunderstood. Donald John Trump, a figure impossible to ignore, a businessman turned president, a force of will wrapped in a red tie and defiance, loved, hated, resisted, followed. But beneath the headlines, beneath the politics, there was something else, a question no one could answer with certainty. What did Donald Trump believe in when no one was watching? He surrounded himself with preachers. He held a Bible in front of a church. He spoke of faith. But faith, real faith, isn't just words in a speech. It shows itself in the quietest of places, in the moments away from the cameras, in the presence of someone who carries something different. Not power, presence, spiritual authority. And that's where the second man comes in. The one the world is still learning to understand. Apostle Joshua Selman. No political campaign, no global media machine, no trending headlines. Yet when he speaks, rooms fall silent. Not because he demands attention, but because something follows him. Something that doesn't come from charisma or training. It comes from being with God. He leads no nation, yet kings have sat in his meetings. He built no empire, yet the halls of his gatherings echo with the weeping of men whose titles couldn't save them from conviction. Selman walks softly, but the weight he carries is not of this world. He was not seeking power, but power was seeking him. And one day, without warning, it did. It began with a phone call, private, quiet, unusual, a request. A high-level figure wanted a spiritual meeting, anonymous, coded, no details given. Selman didn't flinch. He didn't ask for explanations. He simply prayed. And then he went. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a private aircraft began its descent. It was not tracked by the usual networks, no official visit, no diplomatic alerts, just coordinates and an arrival time. The location, a secure airstrip in West Africa. The reason, unknown. The atmosphere, still. But even before the jet's wheels touched the ground, something had already shifted in the spirit. It wasn't just about who was coming, it was about what was about to happen. And while teams secured the perimeter, while curious staff whispered guesses and speculations, one man walked slowly toward the runway. No protocol, no fear. Just a man sent on assignment, Apostle Joshua Selman. He had no idea what he would say. He wasn't told who he would meet, but he knew one thing. God had gone ahead of him, and in just a few minutes, the man who once held the codes to nuclear weapons would be standing face to face with a man who held the mysteries of the kingdom. Not in a palace, not in a church, at an airport. Two worlds were about to meet, not in confrontation, but in surrender. And that is where everything begins. The wheels touched the ground with barely a sound. No press conference, no red carpet, just the hush of the wind against steel and the quiet movement of men who had been trained to speak only when necessary. When the door opened, no one stepped out at first. The moment held its breath. Then finally he emerged. There was no applause, no cheering crowd, only the former president of the United States standing at the top of the stairway, silent. But something was different. It wasn't his suit. It wasn't his stride. It was his eyes. They didn't scan for threats. They searched, as if looking for someone. Then he saw him. Standing alone just outside the boundary marked for security was Apostle Joshua Selman. No entourage, no bodyguards, no announcement. Only a man whose life had been marked by obedience. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else faded. Without a word, Donald Trump began to walk toward him. Every step seemed heavier than the last. This was not the walk of a president. It was the walk of a man carrying something too heavy for flesh and blood. He stopped a few feet away. There were no introductions, no handshakes, just silence. Then slowly, he took one step forward, then another. Then with no warning, he did something no one expected. He dropped to his knees. The air tightened. Even the security detail froze. Here was a man who had once stood before generals and heads of state, now kneeling before someone who had never sat in a political office. No one said anything. No one dared move. And then came the words, quiet, almost trembling. "Pray for me." Apostle Selman didn't speak at first. He simply looked down at the kneeling man and then lifted his head toward the sky. No microphone, no music, just his voice, and heaven responded. He began to pray, not a rehearsed prayer, not something crafted for performance, but something real, deep, measured, precise. "Father, here is your servant, not as the world sees him, but as you do, a soul, a man in need of your light. Give him wisdom beyond counsel. Bring him into truth that no strategy can offer. Let him encounter you, not through religion, but through revelation." The wind picked up gently at first. A nearby worker would later say it felt like the atmosphere changed. Not a storm, not a spectacle, just a shift. The kind of shift that doesn't move leaves. It moves men. The prayer continued. Selman's voice was steady, unwavering. There was no fear in him, no awe for titles, only reverence for the one who had brought them both to this moment. And the man who once stood behind the presidential seal bowed his head, silent, still. Something was breaking, not out of weakness, but surrender. It wasn't the kneeling that stunned those watching. It was the stillness in his face, the kind of stillness that only comes when the soul finally exhales. For years, this man had been surrounded by noise. But here, in this forgotten airstrip, in the shadow of Africa's red sun, there was only peace. When the prayer ended, Selman reached forward and gently placed a hand on Trump's head. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, Trump stood, not abruptly, but slowly, as though something had lifted from his shoulders. He looked at Selman. Their eyes locked again, and then he leaned in and whispered something. No one knows what he said. Selman never repeated it. Trump never spoke of it. But from that moment on, both men turned and walked away. There was no media frenzy, no closing statement, just departure. But those who were there, those who saw it, they were never the same. Because what they witnessed wasn't a photo op. It wasn't a political move. It was the moment when a throne met an altar. And when the noise of the world finally gave way to the sound of one man's heart crying out for something more. And he found it in a man who didn't carry power the way the world defines it, but carried God. The aircraft lifted into the sky just as quietly as it had arrived. No one chased it. No reporters scrambled to catch the story. No social media post broke the silence. But those who were there, they knew. They didn't need photos. They didn't need headlines. Because some moments aren't meant to be captured. Some moments are meant to be remembered, only in spirit. And though the world never officially acknowledged what took place on that airstrip, the shift was real. Something changed. Maybe not in policy, maybe not in government, but in the realm that precedes all of that. In the place where thrones are just dust unless they are aligned with eternity. There were whispers, of course, a few staffers who told the story in hushed voices, pilots who said they had seen something they couldn't explain. But nothing ever made the news. Nothing ever leaked beyond the inner circle. And maybe that's exactly how it was meant to be. Because this wasn't for the world to broadcast. It was for the world to feel. A seed had been planted. And though it may not have bloomed immediately, something in the spirit realm had shifted. And it raised a question that still echoes. What happens when power meets presence? What happens when a man who's had everything meets the one thing he cannot control? Not approval, not applause, but truth. Truth that doesn't flatter. Truth that doesn't bend. Truth that exposes, heals, and redeems all at once. And Apostle Selman? He never spoke of the encounter in any sermon. He never used it to raise an offering. He never sought attention. He simply returned to his assignment, week after week, teaching, praying, serving, as if nothing had happened. But for those who understand how the Spirit of God moves, they knew something had happened. A door had opened. A symbol had been revealed. It wasn't just about Trump. It wasn't even just about Selman. It was about what it represented, that in a world obsessed with visibility, there is a kingdom still governed by invisibility. That while men fight for control of nations, God waits for surrender, not with force, but with invitation. And when it comes, when a man truly lays it all down, not in public, but in private, that's where real transformation begins. So what do we do with a story like this? Do we debate it? Do we question it? Or do we let it question us? What would we do if we stood face to face with the presence of God? Would we kneel or walk away? Would we explain our power or surrender it? Because if he could kneel, if the one the world called powerful could lower himself before a man who carried the presence, then maybe, just maybe, there's something here for the rest of us to learn. That your title doesn't exempt you, your success doesn't excuse you, and your platform doesn't elevate you. In the eyes of God, there is only one question: will you bow? Because sometimes it's not the man on stage who's closest to heaven. It's the one on his knees. And sometimes the greatest shift in history doesn't start in a palace. It starts on a runway, with one man, one prayer, and the weight of eternity watching in silence. So now, you know what happened. But the question is no longer about that runway, it's about you. What would you do if your moment came? If everything you built, everything you controlled, everything you protected couldn't help you in that one holy second? Would you kneel? Would you ask for prayer? Would you even recognize the moment if it came? Because the truth is, most divine encounters don't come when the lights are on. They come quietly, unexpectedly, sometimes even inconveniently. But they come. And when they do, they always demand the same thing: surrender. That's what this story's about. Not politics, not personalities, but posture. the posture of the heart. Whether you're a leader, a student, a parent, or a stranger scrolling in the dark, the same invitation is extended: to stop, to bow, to ask. Pray for me. 3 words. But behind them, humility, desperation, faith. And maybe that's where God does his greatest work. Not in the crowds, not in the applause, but in the quiet kneeling of a soul that finally says, I can't carry this anymore. If this story stirred something in you, then don't let it end when the screen goes black. Ask yourself, where do I need to surrender? Who do I need to pray with? What am I still trying to control that God is asking me to release? And if you're willing, right now, wherever you are, you can kneel too. Not because anyone's watching, but because heaven always is. If this touched you, share it. Someone else may need this moment. And don't forget to like this video, not for the algorithm, but to help it reach someone who's quietly asking for answers. And subscribe, because this isn't entertainment. It's an invitation. We tell stories here, real ones. Stories that stretch your faith, stir your soul, and call you deeper. This is not the end, it's a beginning. Thank you for watching. And remember, it's not the spotlight that reveals a man. It's who he becomes when he kneels.